still a man. I am still capable of rage, of pettiness, and hope. The two of us have been more exposed down here than anyone, but your moral compass hasn't fluttered. I'm still capable. Neither of us has sprouted wings. This creature isn't all powerful. If Satan himself is in there, I doubt he's a match for Lavinia Bidlow.
We're taking a terrible risk. It means to destroy us.
If we've lost hope, it already has. It's not funny.
Whoops. Mr. Burrows?
Mr. Scampoli?
You look very fine this podcast.
I think so too. I got a new haircut. And I also think that episodes 4 and 5 of The Nevers look pretty good too. We're talking about Undertaking and Hanged in a combo episode. Episode 4 directed by David Smell, who also directed episode 3 and written by Madhuri Sakar. And episode 5 directed by Joss Whedon, written by Melissa Iqbal. And it's interesting to see there's a lot of, like, looking at the writers, besides Joss Whedon, Jane Espenson, there's some people on the come up, it seems, because when you look at these people's IMDb's, there's like, 1 or 2 things on there, which is always cool to see.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, I mean, looking them up, like they've been working on stuff, at least their credits on IMDb and whatnot, like going back to like 2013, 2010 or whatever. So I have to assume in situations like that, there's probably a lot of like writer's assistant work that we don't necessarily see like credited or whatever, but it's nice to pull these people up, give them a shot, and they're on the come up on a fresh new show that I hope more and more people are giving a chance.
Yeah, maybe we can take a moment just at the start. So we're almost at the end of the first half of the season. And we can talk about generally. We're going to dive into the details of the episodes to a certain extent, obviously. But I'm really enjoying it still. But I have it's a bit disconcerting. It's a bit reminiscent of Cobra Kai before it was on Netflix, which we've also discussed Cobra Kai in detail, a show we've loved for years, and seemed to be slowly just getting itself cancelled because it wasn't put in front of the right people, because there were loads of people who would enjoy it, but they didn't see it. And I'm not sure, it feels like a little bit of that, maybe a little bit of the show being a bit confusing, inaccessible to people. I don't know. I really like it still, but yeah, is like anyone are they watching The Nevers? Because I haven't heard anyone but me talk about it.
Yeah, honestly, people I talk to in day to day, I haven't really heard any feedback or heard that they're checking the show out. I mean, it does feel like it has, like most shows, especially something like this, it is a kind of built for a nice cult internet following. It does have the big hurdle of Joss Whedon, which used to be, a great plus. But now it's more of a hurdle, where people are kind of taking a stand, with this show. Which, hey, can't blame him for it either way. But, yeah, I mean, and I think just in general, like I said when we discussed the first episode, I'm not one to watch like a period piece. So that kind of puts me off immediately. Like I probably wouldn't have checked this show out without Joss Whedon's name attached to it. I'm glad I did. But I assume there's a lot of people like that out there, because even similar to like when Game of Thrones started, I mean, it's hard to remember, but there were people initially, like you had to talk them into be like, no, it's not even though it became dragons and magic and everything. But you had to be like, no, it's not dragons and magic. It's political intrigue and incest. And everyone's like, hell yeah, let's make this the biggest show in the world.
Everyone was like that. I remember that. It's interesting you said that about like it definitely has the potential for a big cult / internet following. I think to some extent that's not to its detriment, but I have had like several moments watching this where the show acts as if the characters have earned more trust and interest than they actually have, and they're
I
really
agree.
well designed characters, and I do like their different dynamics. Like I like what I'm seeing. It's just I am not as invested as the show thinks I should be, and that kind of feels like it's kind of relying on fan obsession or fan fiction, like watching some of the clips between like they have like behind the scenes of how they did this scene or that. They're going like, and of course Nimble's gonna feel this or that because this happened or whatever, and I'm like, as if we'd know that fella's name. They mentioned it once maybe like an episode ago, but generally like I am willing to become invested in them. I just haven't had time, and I guess this is sort of the trade-off we were talking about probably in the first episode we were discussing this. We were talking about, you know, the difference between a show like this and a Monster of the Week, because the pace, it's stuff can seem to be flying by, whereas in a sort of Monster of the Week, a season has 22 episodes. What that gives you is time to connect with the characters through each like iteration, each repetition of them solving a mystery or whatever happens on this show, you know, and just in a sense, that can often lead to loads of filler and unnecessary shit. And I do appreciate a show that will just get straight to the main story and fucking nail the main story. But the show does act as if we've had all of those little moments to make us care even more. And I still think I'm like on the side of people who would care quite a lot, you know, having watched this. But I feel like the show thinks I should care even more.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say, especially about these two episodes, 4 and 5.
Yeah,
Is
especially
the
with
show,
a lot of speeches and stuff, and I'm like, I guess.
the show's working in like a shorthand that it hasn't earned fully.
Yeah.
Because even like plot points, I feel like they're like glossing over stuff, because unless maybe I'm missing things. Because like, for example, in one of these episodes, maybe it's episode 5, like all of a sudden there's like a registration or whatever. And I mean, I don't know. Was that something they brought up before? I guess maybe it was.
No, they do like an intentional time jump
Yeah.
between 4 and 5. I mean, yeah, they do that, I think, intentionally with a lot of stuff like the Galanthi. Obviously, they're all talking about it.
Don't get
Yeah,
me
you're-
started. Everyone's talking about the Galanthi, dude.
I actually didn't mind, but I saw people on Reddit who didn't like it, and I can't really blame anyone for not liking it, because you're just like, yeah, just tell me what's going on, and I'll be invested. I'm not going to be able to invest otherwise, you know?
Well, especially because the episode previous like ends on a like, who is it?
Cliffhanger.
And it's like, oh, and then we cut in like, here we are, 5 weeks later, Galanthi this, Galanthi that. It's underground, clearly. What are we waiting for? Which is, again, it's not terrible, because, you know, I bring this up a lot. Like, would I rather then have a whole episode where by the end they're like, it's called the Galanthi, and then like, oh, it's a piece of the thing. So I guess it's fine. It's not a big deal, but it's just, you know, I guess it's similar to some of the stuff we're talking about in the previous episodes, where it's sometimes breakneck speed, or it feels that way.
Yeah, and then other stuff is kind of drawn out, like the reveal of what that is, because everyone at home is just like, well, it seems to be clearly aliens, so if it is, why don't you just say that it's aliens? And if it's not, you know, get on with it either way, I guess.
And like, again, maybe I'm dumb and I missed something, but with what's her face? I don't want to say what's her face. Yes, yeah, with Amalia, and she's talking about being abandoned a lot. Like, am I supposed to know who she's talking about?
No, but everyone is assuming that she's talking about she's a fucking alien or whatever. But that's what I'm saying. Like, just fucking come out and say it then, you know?
Yeah, like I get it, because but then like she's having these conversations, and it feels like other characters understand what's going on.
Yeah. I think it is a problem, because we can't really get interested in Amalia True's character and motivation. Like, I care more about Adair, maybe because I live in Ireland and I'm a racist, and like but maybe just because she's, you know, she has quirks that are fun, whereas True is just like, I'm annoyed all of the time, and I go and drink instead of going to the funeral, and that's all great. But we also don't know what's going on with her. Like, she's a good actor, and there's moments that are really cool and cool fight scenes, even. Like, but we don't really know. Like, we get that she cares, and I just feel like they're trying to. It feels like a couple of times in these episodes they don't tell us something and make it kind of a mystery, and then later they're just like, oh yeah, it was that thing that you assumed it was all along. Like, just tell us from the get-go, like, about who sent the fisherman to attack Amalia True. And by the way, the fact that he's alive, I think last episode I was like, it's so cool that they introduced this character and kill him, and then I'm like, oh, he wasn't dead. Okay, cool.
Little
but
bummed.
like
I was
they
a little bummed he's not dead.
Yeah, so they kind of have him. They have like the Lord again. I need to look up everyone's name because I don't. I'm sorry, they don't say them enough or whatever.
That's also well. It's weird because sometimes they do say them a ton.
That's
but
true.
again, they work in shorthand. But like, it's kind of tied into what we're talking about. And I know sometimes if you love the show, it feels like we're shitting on the show, but I just want to tell you we're not. We really like the show. We're discussing some of the ins and outs of it. But it's tied because like we're talking about, we're keeping up with all these like shorthand plot points that are popping up. So it's harder to then also keep track of like some of the names here and there. Even though they are like throwing them out rapid pace sometimes.
Yeah, I think shorthand, like that word you used, is exactly right for the show kind of expects you to do some of the work on your own. And sometimes that doesn't really work out, like with, I think, did they call him the fisherman? No? But anyway, the guy who does the fishing, like they have Lord Masson, like, kind of admit that he did it, but not quite. And like they leave something as kind of a slight mystery, and we're like, that's too obvious. That can't be him. And they have this mysterious tone about everything. And then later it was just him who sent the guy to kill Amalia True, I guess. Like they just build stuff up as a kind of mystery, and then they go, yeah, no, it was the thing you assumed all along. So not sure why we didn't just go ahead with it. But yeah, those are some of the general sort of comments. Sorry, what?
Odium. Is that the name you're looking for? I had to look.
I don't know. I like the fisherman.
I like the fisherman too. I think that works well.
Thanks.
But yeah, you're right. Like, because they play up that scene where she goes to the Lord and's like, if you were the killer and I was the lady, like, what would happen? And then it's like, yes, here we are. It's, like they're trying to do like a Sherlock Holmes sparring moment where we all know the deal, but we don't know the deal, which is fine. But with everything else being so mysterious, I don't know. It doesn't hit as well for me.
I mean, I was absolutely like, it can't be Lord Masson because they made me think it was Lord Masson. And then later it's just like, oh yeah, I did that. Like, oh, okay.
And I mean, I don't want to critique it to critique the writing too much, but I do feel like in episode 4, things felt a little bit on the nose where it was like, things like women are dying, like they were like outright stating themes sometimes. Although I guess that's the problem you brought up even in the first episode. So I guess that's not new for the show. But some of the stuff with some of the dialogue to me felt a little on the nose. I should have made notes of some of the specifics, but that's why I was like, did Joss Whedon write this? He couldn't have written this one.
Yeah, I kind of had that thought as well a couple of times throughout these episodes. But let's go through, I guess, and summarize quite broadly. I don't think we need to stop on every scene to comment necessarily, but, in episode 4, Mary's just died. Gotten shot.
Sorry.
That's right. No, set the mood. I like it. Mary's been killed, and it's a big deal that Amalia True is not at the funeral, and there's these, purple ribboners or whatnot, and they're causing a fuss, and everyone's really upset. But they have bolstered the ranks of the Touched, obviously, because a lot of people heard their song. There's this bit with Lord Masson and his factory.
Yeah.
Like, his factory is super central in this episode. How'd you feel about all of that?
This was one of the things, actually, where he's like, what are you trying to form a union? Unions will work. Like, basically, where he's like, come to me one-on-one and not in a group. But I guess that's probably stuff they would say, but it just felt a little flat to me.
But that's in every historical thing, though. They're always like, in 75 years, they're gonna not remember you. They're gonna remember me or whatever. And it's like,
Yeah.
or they're either usually stating something that's so apparently wrong, so that we as an audience could go, haha, they don't know that this is about to happen, even though someone wrote that now, and we're not smarter, like we're not outsmarting people in the past, and it just gives a kind of a weak thrill. But also, when you write about the past, you want to talk about issues of today through the lens of the past, right? So it's something you want to do, but sometimes it's hard to do it not too on the nose when it's literally like, cowards forming a union, come and talk to me like proper Englishmen or whatnot. But yeah, I believe there's a lot of stuff in this episode about figuring out what happened with Mary, of course, and they suspect Mr. Crow, what's his name, Bidlow, for a lot of it. What's his name? Augustus.
Augie.
Yeah.
He's kind of like a character that's annoying me, but we'll see where that goes, because everything's it's always so awkward, but
yeah. Sorry, I was gonna say that I could see that, but I have been enjoying him, and I have been enjoying him and Penance Adair getting along better and all of that.
I do like them.
Adair.
Yeah. Well, and I was gonna critique when I initially, because I guess it works that we watch these or we're discussing these back to back, because cutting back to the beginning again real quick, like, we have Amalia doing the classic guy thing of like getting drunk, getting laid, and getting in fights. I was gonna critique it as kind of her sexuality is kind of toothless up to this point still, where they're always trying to pitch that like she goes out there and gets her man, and that's how she gets all her frustrations out. And I was thinking that it was kind of toothless in comparison to, say, like how we always see Swan and like he's getting laid, but like it's like a legit thing. And I guess they kind of, I don't know, they had to throw in a sex scene in the next episode to prove me wrong. It's a small quibble, but I just thought like, well, if you're gonna pitch this character, I feel like it's when you just have to cut away. I mean, especially like I kind of rolled my eyes when she like jumps into the crowd and then they cut away. Like if you're just gonna cut away, like I don't know. I feel like, are you doing that because it's a lady character? Whereas if it's a dude's character, you always have to like show him getting it on and like finishing the fight or whatever. But again, I mean, they kind of already proved me wrong a bit on that.
Yeah, it's definitely the stereotypical action lead thing, I guess, to do suppress your emotions, etc. And again, that all pretty much works for True in this episode, and then next episode. Because this episode, she's all bottling it all up. That's the whole plot of her, obviously not going to the funeral and not like just trying to deal with the thing in front of them. And then at the end of the episode, it is a kind of a powerful moment when they get like the translation of the song and we don't get what it is, but she gets what it is, and she just kind of bursts out crying because she has had this facade for the past 4 episodes entirely. So that's why episode 5, I get people being maybe frustrated at, the Galanthi being totally jumped over. I'm sure we'll have it hopefully explained to some degree in the episode 6, which is the mid-season sort of break finale. But it means that her motivation moving forward is more like, what's she doing? Because we know she's been bottling everything up until now, and we see that break, but we don't really get the payoff after that. So yeah, I'm sure we'll go back and get it though.
So I think that makes sense. And I mean, what else we have going on?
We got good. Okay, I will. So Lord Masson, we have the sparring match with them, kind of like you said, intellectually Sherlock Holmesy in his library, which then ends up with like Masson is trying to con them into going and fucking up his factory where he's replaced all the shit. And we find out that one of our beloved characters that, again, we have had time to connect with this one, even though I forgot her name. I'm sorry. The one with the brooch, the one who's the traitor in this episode.
Oh, Lucy, I believe.
Lucy. Yeah, sorry.
My
So
dog.
Lucy Best. She's the traitor in this one. That's kind of the big reveal. That is all pretty fair and good and dramatic, I think. Like I really like the fight between her and True at the end of the episode where she's making shit explode because that's what she does. All pretty cool stuff. And basically that ends up with her brooch becoming important because it was kind of they really zoomed in on it in an earlier episode, like this is going to come back later. But again, I feel like it's a little bit shorthand because we don't really know these characters' relationships. Though I will say for Lucy, just the bit about her baby shattering in her arms, and we get that in detail in the previous episode, like that's enough to build up to this moment. So it rings pretty true for me.
Yeah, and I mean, not to be that guy, I guess I'm gonna be, where because it's like they're like it could have been someone in our midst, and it's almost like they immediately cut to her, and you're immediately like, oh yeah, it's her. And I guess maybe they did that on purpose. I don't know. And also, like I feel like it was again like shorthand because I almost like just endeared myself to this character like an episode ago when they told us like her origin. And I mean, I guess she's probably going to be back, so it'll probably develop more from here. And kind of in a similar fashion, like this whole like Effie character, I'm just confused when she shows up because I'm like, isn't that Malady? Like, I mean, did you not recognize that it was the same actress when this character showed up?
I'm pretty much like face blind as a person. So I'm not a good rule of thumb for this. I did not recognize her, but even not recognizing her, it's still so obvious that something's up with her throughout all of her interactions and everything. But the reveal did work for me then. So I did not see it was the same person. So
It's
well
weird
done on spotting that, Jim.
Because yeah, it doesn't. I mean, I'm not trying to be that dude like, oh, I knew it, but it's more. I guess it was more so her voice because I was like, oh, that's the same actress, isn't it? And also I feel like she looks like she's in a disguise for some reason. Like that's what you're saying. How it's like clearly there's something up, but I didn't want to Google it at the time because it already aired. So I was like, oh, I'm not going to Google this and have things ruined. But I mean, I'll give it to him. Like, it's better to have the same actor like in the spot than try to do a weird switcheroo or, you know, give her like a morphing power or something like that, which they could have, or they could have just did, weird thing, pulls a mask off. So, I mean, they went for it, but it was mostly hearing her voice. I was like, wait, that's her? What's going on?
Well, I mean, that's really interesting. I'd be really interested to hear if anyone's listening to this and would like to share like your input of did you recognize her or did you just think there was something fishy with her or whatever. Like, do email us at showswhatyouknow@gmail.com or tweet at us. That's at showswhatyouknow, you, the letter U. Because I'm really interested to hear like if you're just in a very small percentage that would notice that, or if it was just kind of fucked and if they messed it up, because I didn't recognize her at all. But again, I'm like super face blind, to be honest. Like I'm not very good at that sort of thing.
Yeah, and I mean, if there's any time to do something like that, it would be here in the first season, in the first few episodes, because like we were even just talking about, we're still trying to juggle names and stuff like that. So I'm sure it did work. I'm not trying to say I'm super smart or something. It was mostly just in my ear. It's because I always do that when I watch like animated movies. Like, whose voice is that? You know, who is this? So it's just a dumb thing I do.
I'll say it, Jim. You are super smart.
Oh, thank you. That's fishing.
Yeah. The only other like main thing in this episode is obviously Malady gets caught because he shows up at the police station and like is choking out the chief of police or whatever, and talking about how she didn't kill Mary. We figure out later, spoilers for episode 5, that this is all kind of orchestrated because she does a swap-aroo, but we don't know that yet at this point. I did want to call out, I really enjoyed the scene of the child who speaks all the languages, kid, Myrtle, right? She's the scene where she's sort of in the room, and because they've added so much to their ranks and they're from all over, and these are as we've talked about previously, the impoverished, the not the people at the highest reaches of society. So they speak more than just one language usually, because they're usually not from like just where you just need English. They're immigrants and so on. So they're able to go through and get it translated with translate what she's saying, which you'd think they'd then be able to do for anything she wants to say, really. But I guess you need to get the whole conglomerate together to make it work.
Yeah, because it's like a mixture, right? It's like a mixture of it keeps going in and out of different languages. And I mean, it was clear that she was going to be important. There's going to be some sort of payoff because she's like the first like touched we see them recruit or save, or however you want to phrase it. But I think it is a nice payoff, and yeah, it's a nice way to show the variety of people they've now brought in and use all, like, everyone's putting their heads together and working together. So I love to see it.
And as with any sort of X-Men like thing, it's cool to see a power introduced that seems to be more of a detriment than a positive, and then see how that can actually be beneficial in the long run. Apparently she understands all languages automatically because of this. She just can't control which language she's speaking. Maybe she'll be able to control that over time. But yeah, in this case, understanding a non-human language, pretty cool stuff. So the big reveal at the end is, the Galanthi, and episode 5 opens with this big blue orb that I guess is the Galanthi or one Galanthi. They even talk about, we don't know what the Galanthi is, but they talk about how to pluralize it and say like, it's Galanthi even when it's just one or when it's multiple. And it's like, because the characters have this intimate understanding of what's going on and why it matters, it does get a little bit annoying. It didn't annoy me that much because I am setting my hopes on getting all of this paid off in the next episode, and I'm okay with waiting. But if they don't do that, I'll be fucking annoyed as shit.
Yeah, I was just, because I kept being like, who's Galanthi?
Yeah.
Who is that person?
But yeah, I mean, the thing is, I expected this show, the subreddit, to be like full of theories. The most popular, I'm not 100% sure, but I'm pretty sure the most popular post on there that was up this week anyway is just this screen cap of Augie when he's being interrogated by Penance, and he's like, what's happening? I don't know what's happening. And the caption's like, every fan of the Nevers. Because they don't go into it. And so instead of theories, we have that. Everyone assumes they're aliens. We assume that, that True is an alien. Maybe she jumped in the water, her human self died, but because she got the spore on her or whatever, like an alien went into her and it's in the driving seat or whatever. Like we assume there's something like that. But if that's it doesn't really make sense to hold off on the reveal, since that's the assumption. There's not 100 different theories. There's basically just that.
It's funny though, because like, I mean, I watched these 2 episodes like an hour ago. I watched them back to back, and honestly, that didn't cross my mind whatsoever. But I also didn't have a lot of time to let them sit or even like go online and see what people were thinking, because I'm still sitting here thinking like, was her sister? Is her sister talking to her? Is her husband? Couldn't be her husband. That's a dude. Can't be a guy that's going to be the one that come in to save the day. But yeah, clearly, I mean, now that you tell me that, it's like, yeah, of course, it's aliens, and she's an alien. And everyone knows she's an alien, except us, the audience.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like it. I mean, what else is the Galanthi? Again, I guess I'll be impressed if they do something else with it. But I don't know. It just seems like what this show has been showing me previously is that they keep the air of mystery and then do the reveal of what you assumed along the way, because they've done that like twice. So I assume it's going to be the same thing with this, which isn't too bad. Like, I still like the concepts being thrown around. But anyway, this episode 5, is all about the execution, right? Because we start with a conviction. We've jumped ahead for a bit. As you said, we get a sexy sex scene in there. I think she gets a couple in this episode, True. If you count fingering. And we have Malady like singing in the prison, like just basically a montage setting up what's going on, and the lords discussing how it's an outrage that there's going to be a public execution, and some of them saying, no, we need to do this. And honestly, am I the only one who's like, sure, it was olden times? What's the big deal?
I think that too. I'm like, aren't they? It's olden times. They're all savage people, so they they do something backwards like this. That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, of course. That it's kind of funny because I think they had to have this discussion between the lords at the start to set up that it is actually like a controversial decision at the time. Because if they were just like public execution, I'd be like, yeah, of course, why not?
Even to the extent that some of them are like, this is fucked up even for us. And then I guess what they also hint that one of the other guys' daughters might also be have a turn or something like that he's hiding.
Yeah, no, she has lymph nodes or something. Wait, what does she say? I mean, I have it here. Lumbago. I don't know what that is, but she stands up and says it. There's a dramatic camera movement. It's great. Which is so shit because Lord Masson is obviously the one who has a kid who is like in his dungeon because she turned into a werewolf or some bullshit.
Yes.
But yeah, so there's a lot of speeches in this episode, to be frank. Like there's a lot of talking back and forth about a lot of like concepts and ideas, more so through later on in the episode, but even like the clip from the start of our podcast with the scientist and Miss Bidlow and all of that,
who's clearly I mean, I guess he was already a villain, but like he's clearly like the guy that's like overtaken by the thing, and he's like, look, it doesn't even do anything bad, or does it? But I kind of love that.
Yeah. That is a cool idea. I mean, it's an obvious but cool thing. And he does his little speech. They all have the goggles, and I guess they have all the like, lobotomized people working there because supposedly that this thing is what's giving people powers. And he says like, oh, we've managed to be here without sprouting wings or whatever, even though he might be taken over, as you said. And I think Bidlow, maybe it's an obvious guess, but I assume she just wants to be able to walk and wants to use this for that somehow. I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe not. But yeah, the episode does end with one of these people. It's the person from an earlier episode doing the floaty thing, right? So apparently this thing is giving people back their powers anyway, even though they're semi-lobotomized. So yeah, it's pulsing more and more. That's the thing as well. So they think it's going to maybe hatch. They're going to try to get it out of the city, I guess, underground. But True has this plan to go in and snatch it, and that becomes the whole big conflict, whether they're going to do that or, as Penance wants, just go and save Malady, even though it makes no sense to do that, right?
Yeah. It's just kind of because obviously they're just setting up the parallels here between Penance and True, and how like, you know, again, we're seeing, even though like you said, she was bottled up in the last episode and is kind of letting it out now, but she still has this mission. She was abandoned and she didn't ask for this. And then like we get to see it like literally take place in the courtyard where it's like, here's my plan. I'm doing this. Well, I'm doing this. And it's like, pick your side. Let's see where your allegiances are.
I guess that was the bit where I mostly felt that like they hadn't quite earned that moment, because I was like, they've talked at each other about this, and from context, I can tell that they care a lot. But the dramatics between them, and especially in like, oh, you have to pick a side and stand on either side. It's like you're doing the whole X-Men Xavier and Magneto thing, but you're doing it like way too early, because literally some of them could just go off and do one thing and some do another thing, and then you reconvene, which is what they basically do, but they make it feel as if it's not that. They make it feel as if who's going to be the new leader of this here outfit.
Yeah. And shit, I lost my thought because there was a forget it. I lost my thought. I'll have to come back to it.
That's all right. We have, just to touch on a couple of the other scenes that we might skip over, we have Nick Frost showing up again a bit more here, chatting with Lord Masson, and being really charismatic. I really like Nick Frost. And like this is where we kind of get the reveal that he made Odium think that the order came from the Beggar King, from Nick Frost, but actually Masson was the one who intercepted and made him go and try to kill True, which is I guess fine. I guess that makes sense. And he basically recruits the Beggar King to cause chaos in the streets because Lord Masson really, really hates the Touched. We knew that all along. But yeah, we get him orchestrating this whole thing to happen. This basically a crystal night to connect it to Nazism. They're forced to wear blue banners. Like, it's all pretty obvious stuff. And they're basically going to have a is that what it's called in English? Crystal Night, where they go and shatter all the Jewish shops in Nazi Germany as they were taking control. Basically, just have a bunch of anti-touched riots happen in connection with the hanging. And he wants that to happen because he's a dick.
Yeah, and like some of it, they're like propping up themselves. I do remember I was going to say like, a little bit, like kind of similar to Penance's whole thing of like, you know, she doesn't want people to be killed and she doesn't want to make weapons and stuff like that. But it also reminds me of when Mundy chases down Malady. I thought he killed her basically in that scene.
Yeah.
He's slamming her head against the wall and chokes her out because a few scenes earlier they're like, this is the bear or what, the ape or whatever. Like, this guy's a fucking maniac. But then when someone comes over, he's like, hey, no, that's not how we do things around here. We do real justice. But that's all. It's just a weird, because I don't know if I was the only one that took that from it, because I was like, oh, he just murdered her. So now what's going to happen?
No, I didn't think that. But yeah, I get that. I even though I was saying things are very on the nose, I still liked the scene where, you know, they're True and Adair are discussing all the ethics of this nonsense, and then go out and there's just 100 nooses there. Like, it's very ominous, and a good like momentum to push Adair into staying up all night and putting together this plan. And it's a cool idea. I think the problem is partially that I was never sold on a public execution being so much better than a private execution. And yes, it's bad that Malady has become what she's become because she's mentally ill, and it's not entirely her fault necessarily. But I think that's a pretty advanced viewpoint to have when you're living in a society where she has murdered loads and loads of people, and like, what do you want to do with her exactly? Like, it's kind of difficult to empathize with Adair's point of view, because we are already like, sure, public execution, private execution, who cares? And that's like a big thing for everyone in the episode. At least that's how I felt about it. And then
you're
like,
right.
we have to rescue Malady, and I'm like, what are you going to do when you've rescued Malady, though? Because first of all, I don't think it's going to work. And secondly, how is that, like, I know you don't want the murder of a Touched in public so that will spur on more anti-Touch sentiment, but also rescuing Malady is not a good PR move either, right?
Yeah, well, that's right. Because you reminded me, because there's the line where she's like, they're executing her for being touched. And it's like, no, they're not. They even said, I mean, I get, she's correct, but like, if I'm just a dumb shit villager, commoner, and you know, this lady's been terrorizing our town or our city, whatever you want to call it, and they even say like she's murdered at least like 15 people and terrorized, like, that's more the takeaway. And honestly, to me, it feels the opposite. Like, her being loose to me is more dangerous to the idea of the touched than like if they just put her down they just put her down in public, and then we have this orphanage of all the good ones. Oh man, they really won me over.
Let's see, I was just looking up real quick out of interest the history of capital punishment in the UK. I mean, it does seem to be that they put an end to public executions well before this, you know. So if that's not happened in 40 or 50 years, I guess it's a big deal. But but just ethic, I assume they would have gotten that right historically, because that's the kind of detail they would leave in place, because they're fucking everything else up, obviously, like introducing steampunk and cars and all this bullshit. So they would probably keep that sort of sense of what life was like in that time period, hopefully. Find out more at Real History. But essentially, I am not like, even though I don't know why True wants the Galanthi or what it is, I still empathize more with her quest, because I'm like, yeah, this is clearly like not a good idea. Because what the fuck are you gonna do with Malady once she's out? Like, even if you exile her and send her away from the city, like you did with Lucy, like, she's just gonna go off and murder a bunch of people. So that's not
Yeah.
good either. But anyway, we get on to the actual like day of the execution. Malady, in the form of the reporter, does like whisper something to Swan that we don't hear, and Swan is acting like super sus at the execution. But I don't really, I don't see the end point of that. Like, I don't see what happened there. Like, if he's a bad guy now, or if Malady just told him something unimportant. I don't know, because he's just kind of jumping up and down and acting like a weirdo, but I don't know what he's doing like at the execution. I don't really remember. You just watched it more recently. I don't know if any of that made sense to you.
No, I don't know, because like I still kind of don't get his character a lot. Like I was saying before, it feels like he's from a different show, and so far I haven't seen like it like come together fully. So yeah, I'm kind of with you. And then I mean, I guess like part of it is the whole thing of like, I don't like the blue bloods. But then it's like once shit goes down, he wants to immediately go back up there. So I mean, there's obviously some symbolism there, but yeah, I don't really have a guess on why he was acting, how he was acting after someone whispering in his ear.
Yeah. And so I guess because I didn't spot that the reporter was actually Malady, I have to be the one, the part in this episode to say this was all pretty cool to me. I assume it wasn't to you. I assume you were just like, yeah, of course she's the reporter. Or even if you were just suspecting it, it would have like stopped you to a certain extent. And yeah, even like it was clear that stuff was going on, obviously, with multiple plots to get her out of there or whatever. But when Malady hangs herself, I did think that she had done that. And that like I kind of doubted it, but I did think it, and the reveal worked pretty well for me on especially the shoe coming off, and you see the foot that's all fucked up, because we've had that so well established in a previous episode that it's such a nice like pin drop for us to figure that out, and for everything to come together in the last few moments of the episode. So all of that kind of basically worked for me, so that was pretty cool.
Yeah, no, I still think it is pretty cool. I mean, like I said, I didn't know for sure, but I was like, is this the same actress? Like, what's going on? And I was like, is there something about her power that I don't know? Like, I thought it was like just something to do with, you know, her turn or whatever. But
yeah,
I mean, it still works. I can't poo-poo on it too much.
Yeah. And so there's a couple of plots, like I said, like the electricity thing. The only thing for me was that it didn't feel like, yeah, a lot of people would die, but not like that many, because they'd be only the ones at the front. But I guess the stampede would lead to more people being killed, as we see almost happen to one of our characters, the one who turns stuff into ice and she's trying to get out and is then kind of trampled. And in the after show thing, they kind of talk about how this is a big moment that for the audience that really humanizes Malady, because Malady, in the form of the reporter, goes and helps one of our characters who's being stampeded over. But we don't know it's Malady at the time, so they're acting like, wow, it's such a huge thing that we're seeing Malady's empathy and everything. And I'm like, I didn't see any of that, because I didn't know that was her.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess that's like a step towards if they do want to make her more of like a I guess she's already Magneto, but more of a Magneto that could pull some of our main characters away, because right now it would make no sense for someone to like join her, because she's a wacko still. But I guess it shows she does have the capacity for a bit more.
I mean, they've definitely like hinted at the doctors that she killed were all like men who did fucked up stuff to her. So it's a pretty easy way to bring her back. I mean, they did go into the opera and literally machine gun people at random, but hey, they're all upper class anyway, so you know, fuck them, right? That's they don't want us to unionize, so we should kill them. I agree, the Nevers. Yeah, and I mean, that basically brings us to the end of the episode. We get the riots. Obviously, I guess the effect is even enhanced because the Beggar King arranges these riots to happen, and of course, there's just been people killed through Melody's malfeasance. And even Nick Frost has a moment where he's there with the scotch and he's like, "Oh, what have I done? I better drink this scotch." And that's kind of where we ended, more or less.
Well, you know what was a bit much is like, because yeah, I mean, a riot happens, people are dying, and then when Penance gets back, she's like, "How'd it go?" It was a riot. It's like, oh, you're making a fucking like, but it's like a weird double entendre joke, kind of like, oh, it was a lot, like, you know what I mean? It was a riot. That's how I read it. Did you read that it was a joke, almost like a Joss Whedon-y, like, I practiced this before and I'm sweaty. Like, I don't know. I was like, what is that goof?
Oh, right. Yeah. Because, yeah, no, it's a bit goofy. I was more just concentrated on their storyline and like, right, I guess we're going to literally rewind time and see how we end up here. Yeah.
I like that. I like that idea that we see a hint of what Amalia dealt with. And yeah, I assume we're going to, in the next episode, we'll see what was going on while the riot was happening.
Yeah, I guess I was definitely too caught up for the pun to like annoy me, but yeah,
although
it was all right.
The other thing, although I guess maybe this is still just another thread we're going to get into, what's the with the handle they didn't pull, and then he throws his jacket on it and the handle goes and something comes out of the back? Is that something important?
I saw clips of that when I was scrubbing through, but I don't really remember. No, there were
I was just waiting for a big balloon. I thought a big balloon was going to come out and be like, "The touched her all right."
Well, wait, there is like a big balloon thing, though, right?
That was their escape. Something like that. Touched her, okay. Or like a big rat, like when they go to the Sopranos union busting protests or whatever.
Yes, that's a very specific reference. Yeah, no, I thought that was, hang on. Yeah, I'm probably gonna, but that was their means of escape, right? That was the idea, I assume.
Is that what it was? I was like, what is this? I was like, this guy's so dumb that he that just throws his jacket on the handle.
No, I assumed that was just how they were going to get Melody out of there, but I don't know what they were going to do after that. But yeah, we see, now that you mention it, I guess we can like freeze frame on True's party and make some assumptions, because we see Bonfire Annie getting patched up, and Augie looks like he's leveled up and being badass a little bit because he's there bleeding and looking a bit cool for once. So maybe he'll be less annoying, but I won't make any promises to him. And yeah, that's what we're going to see next episode, I guess. Winding back down. I mean, we already did the general discussion kind of up front. I'm still really enjoying it. There's usually like one or two things per episode that doesn't quite hit for me, and I think that has a lot to do with them not having or not taking the time to build out these characters. But I also don't see how a show with this budget level could be Buffy with 22 episodes, going in on all these different side adventures. So it makes sense. But it just, the show expects you to do some of the work for them in connecting dots, and that makes sense, but also in like connecting and starting to care more about the characters based on their look and based on their presentation and their archetype that they're sort of presenting as in the show. So I think that's kind of a bit to its detriment, but it's the sort of thing that can easily be fixed over time as we get to know the characters better. So I guess the only remaining question is whether the show will be allowed to continue to that point, given that we're not hearing that much discussion on it, sadly.
Yeah. And I know like I probably have sounded very negative in this discussion. I don't mean to do that, because again, these are not really issues to me. They're just small little quibbles I'm pointing out, and I would chalk most of it up to season 1 stuff. Genre shows especially, season 1 is always like, good, but like you're seeing the potential as, they're working out some of the kinks and establishing the characters. I mean, it's TV in general can be like that with season 1, but I feel like especially genre, and especially even Joss Whedon.
I just watched a lot of Angel season 1 recently.
Yeah.
And The Nevers is a really good show, guys.
So, I mean, I don't want to sound too negative because I agree with everything you're saying. I think part of it is a lot of just that I like these characters a lot. So I would prefer some more smaller moments with them before we get into a lot of the big plot stuff. I still like the plot stuff, and I like that I even like that it's a take on X-Men, because without being the X-Men, I like that they're like, well, let's just make our own thing. I think that's cool. So there's a lot to like. I think the casting's great. The actors are great. We mentioned in the first episode, like I immediately liked the characters and was ready to die for them. So I'm on board, and I do hope the show picks up more. I don't mean that like as far as how the show's made. I just mean that as far as audience wise. And I hope that it's doing well, where we know we're getting 6 more episodes for the second half of this season, and I hope it gets picked up for season 2.
Absolutely. That about wraps it up for our discussion. As I said earlier, you can send your thoughts. Did you recognize Melody? To showswhatyouKnow@gmail.com. And you can tweet at us and follow us at showswhatyouKnow. That's the letter U on Twitter. You'll also find all of our other shows and show coverage at showswhatyouKnow.com. All one big brand. And that's about it. Thank you for listening to The Never Afters, because that's the name of our show. We just decided. Nailed it.
Ask me if I'm ever going to give up on this show.
Are you ever going to give up on this show?
Nevers!